I'm sure you've heard of Helen Keller, who was both blind and deaf. Helen observed that blindness separates you from things, but deafness separates you from people. In other words, if you are deaf, you have a communication barrier that can lead to isolation in your family, in your school, in your community, and in your church. Think about how you would feel if you could not participate in the conversations around you. Imagine being 7 years old or 17 and feeling this isolation. How do you make sense of life? How do you learn problem-solving skills in relationships? How can you understand something as abstract as a personal relationship with the God of the universe through His Son, Jesus Christ? Did you know that deafness impacts 1 out of 1,000 kids? That translates to 44,000 kids and young people in the United States. What would it be like? Well, your parents would probably not be able to communicate very well with you. Most deaf kids have hearing parents, and more than 90% of these parents never learn to sign. That means that most deaf kids have significant communication barriers in their own families. The vast majority of deaf kids do not attend church. Most of them are biased against any religious faith, due in part to painful experiences related to church. And as a result, very few deaf kids, or deaf adults for that matter, claim a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. The most frequent statistic cited here is fewer than 2%. Enter DeafYouth Ministries, equipping and working with other evangelical organizations and with churches to reach deaf young people through cutting-edge programs, resources, training, and direct services. Truly bringing together the best of youth ministry with the best of deaf ministry. There are 2 components to the hands-on part of the ministry. Deaf Teen Quest, that's DT Quest, is the primary outreach arm of the ministry, and Deaf Teen Connect is the primary integration arm, which works to effectively bring deaf kids into the local church. Let's take a brief look at each component. DT Quest is a ministry where teams of Christian adults from various denominations work together to reach deaf young people by building relationships with them, mentoring them, and earning their trust for sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. DT Quest leaders primarily use American Sign Language, but at the same time they are flexible to the young person's personal communication preferences. In January of 2008, we were excited to learn that Youth for Christ, that's YFC, made the decision to use DT Quest as its official outreach program to deaf young people. We see this as a major opportunity to establish our ministry in many more areas across the country and to reach many more deaf kids for Jesus Christ. So we have formed a partnership with YFC, where YFC will have exclusive use of the DT Quest name, and DeafYouth Ministries will provide ongoing supervision, expertise, and programming options to YFC. As we look ahead, we will actively work together with YFC to expand the DT Quest ministry and establish new areas across the country. Now let's take a look at DT Connect, the arm of DeafYouth Ministries, which addresses the need to effectively integrate deaf young people into local churches. Many churches want to minister to deaf youth or to individuals with deaf relatives or friends, and they simply don't know how to do it. To meet this need, we got together with Deaf Missions, an international Christian mission organization which offers deaf ministry resources for churches, and we have partnered together to form DT Connect. DT Connect trains and qualifies churches to do excellent ministry with deaf kids and offers those churches the opportunity to access specialized resources for this purpose. It also provides opportunity to collaborate with DT Quest to reach deaf youth and integrate them into the fellowship of the church. DT Connect churches become part of a ministry association, giving them the opportunity to network with each other. What is the desired outcome of our ministry? Changed lives.
My name is Marva Sellers. I'm from Deaf Teen Quest. The first time that I started working with Deaf Teen Quest was about 18 months ago. I'd never heard about it before. And of course, I wanted to get involved when I first heard. I wanted to join and start working. A few months later, I went to the summer internship. And I met several people. Some of you were there. It was a wonderful week, the Summer Institute. And while I was there was a deaf girl that showed up. And of all places, we meet in the cafeteria. I've got all my food on the plate, turn around with my tray, and she's right there in front of me and asks, "Are you deaf?" And I shake my head saying, "Yeah, hold on a second. Yeah, I'm deaf." And we just start talking automatically. I mean, we just drew to each other. And we start talking through lunch and then the different breaks that we had, dinner. We were just together and kept meeting each other in between time and fellowshipping and really enjoying our chat together. I don't remember everything we talked about all week, but one thing that really, really touched my heart and I'll never forget. The girl, when she came to me, she's a big, broad-boned girl, much taller than me. Here's little me, and we have nothing in common. So, okay, we're sitting there talking in the cafeteria as usual, just chatting away, sharing stories, getting to know each other, background, mom and dad, brothers and sisters. And a question from God popped up in my mind. And I said, "Who are your friends?" You know, it's a typical question. We ask that all the time. Who are your friends? That's pretty typical. And I asked her that question, and she looked at me. We had been talking, just going to town with a conversation. But all of a sudden, she just stared right at me and didn't say a word. Everything was quiet. In the back of my mind, I thought, oh no, what did I do? I asked the wrong question. I'm becoming paranoid. But she keeps looking at me, and my mind's going 1,000 miles trying to figure out what I said. And she didn't say anything. We just kept looking at each other. And I thought, well, she's going to say something. And all of a sudden, her expression changed. And she got very quiet, and she signed very small so no one else could see. She said, "I have no friends." And I thought I didn't have anything in common with her. Boy, was I wrong. I just couldn't believe it. That really impacted me because I knew exactly where she was coming from. And I told her, I said, "I know exactly what you're talking about." And she looked at me like, "Yeah, right. You have no idea." And so then I started sharing my story, what I had experienced growing up in my life being deaf. I don't remember all the things I said to her, but I explained everything to her about my life. And she looked at me, and her demeanor changed. And then she was open and fascinated with everything that I said to her. So as time went on, I kept in contact with her. The Summer Institute was done, but then we had Deaf Teen Quest Camp. So I invited her, she came, and we were chatting, and I drove, and we're in the car, and we're just talking. We got to camp, and you know what happened? This was her first time to meet teens her age that were deaf or hard of hearing. It was her first time. Oh, it was a wonderful week. She just was involved in all of the activities and meeting people all week long and developing friendships. You know, of course, camp has to end the end of the week. You have to go home. So we get back in the car. We're headed back to Indianapolis, or Indiana, and I'm driving. She's sitting in the front, it's just the two of us. And the question popped up in my mind again. Who are your friends? And she said, "You are." And then she started naming all these other kids that she had met at camp. I couldn't believe it. I'm driving down the road, and I'm going, and I'm starting to fill up. I just couldn't believe it. I was so blessed. And I kept saying, wow, look at all these names that she's telling me. There was like 15 or 20 names.